Welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, the weather can always play a factor in farming, but so can the soils. And when we look at soils that have too much of one nutrient or the other, too much can be just as much of a problem, if not even more so, than not having enough. We're going to talk specifically about sodium and what you can do if your soils have too much sodium.
We'll also talk about how to apply fertilizer, and this year we're getting lots of questions on StripTill, so we'll compare StripTill to other tillage systems.
We've got a weed of the week today that some might think is even pretty because it puts a flower on, but if you've ever seen it, especially around your home, you're not going to like it. So we'll show you how to stop our weed of the week, but first, here's today's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about grain carts.
You know, when we're thinking about harvest on our farm, a lot of it comes down to, hey, as soon as stuff's ready, we want to get it out of the field as quickly as we possibly can. Now, when you're farming in the northern part of the upper Midwest, snow is also one of those factors that even if it's not ready, sometimes we just got to get stuff out. And if you're trying to get stuff out quicker, this is the reason that many farmers will use a grain cart. But there are some concerns too. It's not all just, hey, this is a great thing, everybody should do it because it's going to speed up harvest. There are always some pros and cons of every choice we make on the farm.
So let's start off with exactly what is this grain cart. It's basically just a great big wagon, like we used to have gravity wagons on the farm, and then it's got an auger, and it's an enormous auger that's coming out of this grain cart. And a lot of times there will also be an auger inside the cart to really speed that flow of grain to the main auger that goes out of the cart. And the idea is that a farmer will take this grain cart pulled behind a tractor and follow right along with a combine, and he will dump then what we call on the go. So as the farmer is continuing to combine through the field, he's also unloading into the grain cart. The grain cart then drives out of the field, usually to a truck, to unload while the combine continues to combine. This was one of my favorite jobs on the farm, was running the grain cart. I thought it was pretty nice and simple and easy. You get to go fast for a little ways. You got to follow right along with the combine.
Well, you're always
stay
in the
right even
action.
with them.
You're always in the
Right.
action, and you're there with the guys hauling the grain away from the field. You're there with the guys that are harvesting. You're kind of a key cog in the whole operation. Now, here's one term that Brian had mentioned earlier. He said gravity wagon. We used to have gravity wagons. What that means is it was a wagon that you would put grain into, and it would just gravity flow out the bottom. Now, we've got this grain cart that we're bringing in the field that some people will call an auger wagon, and the difference is that you're going to auger it out quick. So we can fill it in just a couple of minutes out of the combine. We can also empty that wagon in just a few minutes into a truck that's leaving the field. So as Brian is mentioning, this is a busy job out on the farm during harvest time because you're going to get filled from the combine really quick, then you run and dump in a truck really quick, and then you're going to hurry back to that combine just in case he's full again, so you can keep that combine going so he never has to stop. And this has really helped farmers speed up the harvest, and that works really well. Now, here's the problem. You've got this grain cart that's full of grain, so it weighs a lot, and it's putting all that pressure onto the wheels or the tracks that are running that cart and the tractor as well, and that's going across your field all over the place. So now you've got something called compaction, where we're packing that soil down wherever those tires have run.
So just a few quick tips with this compaction thing. Number one, the grain cart manufacturers aren't stupid. They know there's compaction issues, but what they'll try to do is have great big tires there to really spread that load out. Some of them even have duals on there. They'll have double axles. I mean, they're just trying to spread this out over more tires, over more space, and then it really lessens the compaction. Then the other big thing is just staying out of your fields when the conditions are too wet. In our country, that's pretty easy to do because where we farm, it's really dry in the fall most years, so usually we're not creating a lot of compaction going through the field. But what we really like to do is try to stay running with the rows. If we're running across the rows, that can create problems for next year just because we got a little up and down as we might be planting.
One of the features that farmers will look for when they're trying to buy a grain cart is a scale on that grain cart. So as they're harvesting grain, the person who's running this grain cart will actually, when you fill up, oh, I put 200 bushels in the grain cart. They'll write that down. 200 bushels are coming out of the field. Now, when we're loading trucks, we can load them precisely. So we don't have to worry about, ooh, is that truck full? We don't have to gauge by, well, how much will possibly fit in the truck? Because if you do that, it's going to weigh too much and you're going to be over the load limits that many highway departments will have. So we want to make sure that truck is loaded just right. We also don't want to underload that truck. So for example, many semis that will run down the road, they can haul 80,000 pounds legally. So farmers don't want to send a semi away when it's only hauling 60,000 pounds. They want to fill it up pretty close to that 80,000 pound limit so they don't have to run as many trucks down the road as they would otherwise if they were underfilling the trucks. So there's a lot of efficiency that can be gained for farmers by having a scale on that grain cart. Also, they get instant data. They know exactly how much yield they're taking off the field. And sure, many of them have yield monitors in the combine that are pretty close and are kind of telling farmers how much yield there is in the field. But it sure is nice when you're weighing out that grain, you know for sure what the yield is for that field.
The main reason why grain carts are used all over the country and really all over the world, it just has to do with overall efficiency on the farm. A grain cart costs roughly 1/10 the amount a new combine costs. So just doing the simple math, if I can run a grain cart and because of that, it speeds my combine up 30 to 50%. Because you don't have to stop and unload and waste that time driving to the end of the field or anything else. You can just keep combining the whole time. That really helps out economically on the farm.
So farmers are always looking for ways to do things better, to better meet requirements out there, whether it's load limits on the highway or just get more efficient in their operations so they don't have waste and they don't have time that's lost, because especially at harvest time, time is so critical for farmers. One other job that farmers will take time for in the fall is controlling weeds like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Xtend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
No one understands your farm, your field, and your soil like you. I'm Myron Stein, and at Stein Seed Company, we know your field demands a choice. That's why Stein's corn breeding program combines our industry-leading genetics and superior standability with the most sought-after traits, giving you the best choices for maximum yield. Learn more about Stein's hybrid lineup by visiting steinseed.com or contacting your local Stein Seed dealer.
There's no clock on this job, just the timeless hands of intuition and effort, ticking from within. An endless cadence of committed work, from the passing of Mother Nature's final frost to the hanging dew at harvest. Around here, wheels are always turning, and watches need no winding, because success never rests.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
My data is mine, not mined.
Mine to share,
Mine to keep. It's mine when I want it.
mine where I want it,
And only mine. My data is mine to analyze.
mine to put to work.
Mine to control. It's mine.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
One of the big soil issues we see in fields all over the world is having a high level of sodium. What we're talking about here is if you run a base saturation test and your sodium levels are above 1%, that's trouble. Too much sodium, basically too much salt out in your soil, is going to end up hurting you, hurting your crop, hurting your roots, hurting microbial activity. It's all a bad thing. We've got to figure out how to get that sodium level below 1%. Now, don't get me wrong, most fields are okay, but until you run a test on your soil, you don't really know. And if you do run a test and find that sodium is above 1%, you've got to get it fixed as soon as you can.
You know, we could have almost talked about this in a farm basics time. You know, high levels of sodium are bad. I think if we just made that statement, 99% of consumers out there would say, oh, you're right. If I've got too much salt in my food, that's bad for my body. It's the same thing with plants. If they've got too much salt in that soil, too much sodium in that soil, that can be a big challenge. There's a few things about sodium in soils that can be problems, but the big one for me anyway is just that sodium clogs things up. And all of a sudden we have trouble, especially with water movement into soils. For example, if we've got really high levels of sodium, sometimes we just have trouble with water even penetrating into the soil. That can obviously be a big problem in a hurry.
Okay, so let's talk about, you've identified in your soil test, you've got sodium over 1%. What do you do? Now, you'll talk to some people that'll say, well, if it's a tremendously high sodic soil, there's no fix to it. You know, I get so tired of people saying, well, there's just nothing you can do, and they throw up their hands and, well, you just got to deal with that. Look, I get it if it's rented ground and you say, okay, I can either rent it or avoid it. Sure, I'm going to skip the problem. But if I own the ground, there is absolutely a fix to it. Number one starts with having good drainage. Remember, when sodium turns to salt, salts are leachable. In other words, if I have good drainage through my soil, that sodium and that salt is going to flush out of there. That's exactly what we're looking for here. So you've got to start with good drainage. That means most likely you're going to need to put tile in your ground. And if it's really heavy soil, high cation exchange capacity numbers, you might have to have tile every 25 feet. Maybe every 40 feet.
Well, chances are, if we're talking about farm ground here with high sodium levels, that sodium level didn't get high overnight. It happened over a period of time. The fix is going to be the same way. You're not going to fix it overnight. There's not one thing that Brandon and I can say, oh, put on a pint per acre of this product and your problems all go away. I wish it was that easy, but it's really not. So you have to look at this as, okay, here's a problem that happened over a long period of time. I'm going to start making the right choices so I can get rid of this problem. So Brian talked about, well, we need to install some drainage so we can get rid of some of that sodium over time. That's important. The other side of that coin is whatever's happening to increase sodium levels in that field, you have to identify what that is. For some of you, it may be, well, I'm putting on manure in the same spot every year and over and over and over again. This manure has a high level of sodium and I'm just putting on more than what my crop is actually using. It doesn't need a whole lot of sodium, and so I'm building it up over time that way. Maybe there's some other issues that are going on your farm and reasons why that sodium level keeps building up. Whatever those reasons are, just make the next decision the right decision. So you can't change whatever, 20 or 30 or 40 years of history, but what you can change is this year, what you do to that field, and you say, look, here's something that's adding sodium, I can take that away. Now my sodium percentage may only drop just a tiny little bit, but it's moving the right direction. And if we keep doing that over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, making those right calls and not increasing our problem, but rather starting to fix it that way, that's another thing that you have to do.
Okay, so usually once you fix that drainage problem, then you're going to need to add some gypsum, calcium sulfate. It does two things for you. The sulfate portion is going to combine with the sodium to form sodium sulfate, which is a salt, and that's going to leach out of your soil profile. The other thing is you're replacing that sodium there with calcium, which is a nice big molecule, which gives you more pore space in your soil. So that's a good deal. Just take a look at your soil test. If you're way loaded up on sulfur, though, maybe you don't need to do this step, but that is one common thing that people will do with sodic soils. Number one, fix the drainage. Number two, add gypsum. Beyond that, I guess you've just got to take a look at what else is really going on in your soil. Like Darren said, you know, maybe there's something else, too much manure, but I think too about irrigation. Sometimes we don't have good water and we're pumping water out of the ground that's not very good for us. So maybe you need to either find another water source, go deeper with your well, something like that, or treat that water. You got to look at what you're doing to your soil. soil? Well, once again, high sodium soils absolutely can be managed, so start taking those steps on your farm if you have high sodium soils.
One other thing you want to watch for is our weed of the week. It can be a big problem. We'll show you how to stop it coming up later in the show.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Welcome to the 30-second tour of your local Poet plant. Local producers sell us tons of their grain. We grind it, mix it with water and special enzymes. The result is fermented, distilled, and dehydrated until it's 200 proof alcohol. Corn oil is extracted, and protein and nutrients are condensed, dried, and turned into animal feed, bringing our tour to an end with high-protein feed and cleaner-burning high-octane fuel. Visit poet.com to learn more.
This year's projected U.S. soybean yield will lose over $500 million per point in shrink. Eliminate shrink in your bin. Store grain without lowering moisture content with the AgriDrive Bullseye Temperature and Moisture Controller. The Bullseye monitors air temperature and relative humidity, allowing your fans to utilize the weather's natural condition to maintain your grain at market moisture. Fan run times drastically decrease along with the cost of over-drying. Eliminate shrink today. Call now.
How will you secure your farm for the future? The Quasar Chopping Cornhead from Capello USA will help. Our design is focused on efficiency, longevity, and reducing harvest loss, making the Quasar the corn harvest solution to bring your farm forward. With hundreds of units ready for immediate delivery, secure your farm's future today. Do it for your farm. Do it for them. Order now. Capello USA. Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
We know that the future is liquid. Agriculture Liquid Fertilizer's constant research and development creates next-generation products that seem like science fiction. But the fact is, the yields, the sustainability, the food and fiber that our customers produce season after season is not a dream, but a reality. Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers, helping you grow the future.
Our next topic is strip till. This is one of the most important things you can do on your farm if you want to get deeper fertility, reduce the compaction or almost eliminate the compaction just in your seed zone, and then besides that, to do a minimal amount of tillage. So the reason why we started doing a bunch of strip till on our own farm was we'd taken some no-till acres out of no-till. We'd started with these no-till acres on about roughly half of our farm, let's call it, because we have some highly erodible land. We've got some hills and we were worried about all that erosion. Well, with no-till we absolutely reduced the erosion, but the problem was we really stratified our nutrients and we just didn't have good soil warm-up, so we switched those acres to strip till and we've solved both of those problems.
I think solving a bunch of problems on the farm is important, and keeping our tillage down to a minimum was a big deal for us. And when you look at strip till, there's a few little critical things that I think you have to keep in mind. One, if you're doing strip till this fall, you're building that seed berm for next year, so be really fussy. You're gonna have to take some extra time, especially on the first field, to make sure everything is just right with that berm. If it's not, you need to fix it right now because you're gonna mess up everything on your whole farm for next year, and you're gonna have to come back and do some tillage or run the strip till rig again. You don't wanna do that. So take the time to get things set just right. Number two is that nutrient placement. That's going to be a big deal. However, there are many guys that are talking like us on our farm about, I don't want to put fall fertilizer out. It's too high priced right now for the economics. I want to wait with that. If that happens, you've got a whole nother discussion.
Well, you do, but that's not the way I would go. I'd absolutely put at least some nutrients down with the strip till machine, because what I would challenge you to do is test your soil every 3 inches going down to 2 feet deep. I will almost guarantee you 90% of your soil fertility is in the top 3 inches. So what does that tell you on where you should best place your nutrients? How about below that 3 inches? In fact, we like to put our StripTill fertilizer down at 8 to 10 inches deep. That's awesome. I love doing this with a shank because now I've got nutrients down deeper in the soil. I'm building my deeper soil profile. I'm also leading my roots down deeper. I've got plenty of fertilizer up in those top 3 to 6 inches. I want more fertilizer down. And then, like I said a little earlier, I've basically eliminated compaction all the way down to 10 inches deep. If I use RTK GPS, I place my rows this fall, I plant right over the top of that. I have roots down at 10 inches deep almost immediately after planting. That's huge, especially in dry conditions like we often have on our own farm.
And if you're in high residue situations, you definitely can do strip till in continuous corn. We really like it. You will need good row cleaners in the spring to try and push off any residue that may happen to blow over that strip. For the most part, that hasn't been a big issue for us, but again, you do need to watch out if you've got some residue that blew over.
I don't worry that much about a little bit of residue that blows over. It's usually not that big a deal. But what I would tell you is we do want to make sure we're building as good a berm as possible, like Darren mentioned a little bit earlier, and I really like fertilizing and doing all this stuff in the fall. Now, we're typically not putting nitrogen down on 100% of those acres. We are putting P and K down though. Some of the nitrogen could certainly be saved till spring, but remember with P and K, they stay exactly where you place them. So the guys that are running strip till with coulters, they're not getting the fertilizer very deep, and it's never going to go deep because you didn't place it deep. So that's why I like the shank machine, and I also like the shank in the fall. You can't really do it in the spring very well because by the time it dries out to 10 inches deep, you should have already been planting a long time earlier. So if you're going to strip till in the spring, that's usually where the coulter fits in a little bit better, but just remember, you don't get the fertilizer as deep.
All right, well, you can see there's lots of reasons that you may consider going strip till. There are also some drawbacks as well you'd have to consider. And back to that weed control issue, one of the weeds that we've faced in our strip till fields is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Get ready to take control of weeds like never before. Enlist will build on the Roundup Ready system with new herbicide and trait technology, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm.
Our weed of the week is dandelion.
There's a couple of dandelion plants just right in front of where we're standing, and it is so typical. It's in the rosette stage right now. It's trying to pull in all the water and nutrients that it can and store up in that root system, so in the spring it could be a real problem for us. Now, you may say, well, you're on a field border, and that's where I see dandelions is in the grassy areas. That may be true in your yard. If they get in your field, it is a very difficult weed to control.
Okay, let's talk about it first in the yard. Hit it early in the spring and late in the fall with a good strong shot of 2,4-D. And even though you don't see them in the fall, spray anyway. They're there. If you miss out on that fall treatment, you miss out on the real early spring treatment. You're gonna come along in June and say, oh, I got a bunch of dandelions in my lawn. What do I spray? I say nothing, because 2,4-D at that point is going to move and hurt your trees, hurt your flowers, maybe hurt your soybean crop. You just can't do that. So spray late in the fall, early in the spring, in lawns with a high rate of 2,4-D. Out in fields, you can use 2,4-D in the fall. That's a great way to go. You can also use a high rate of Banville if you're going to plant corn next year. But in the spring, that's where it gets to be an issue. In corn in the spring, I'd still use Banville, but in soybeans, I would really avoid 2,4-D.
Well, that's a big thing. You can't use something that's going to hurt your crop. And even here, we're on the field border. If we were spraying this grassy area, we've got trees nearby. That's why late fall and early spring are such good times, because the trees are dropping their leaves. You're not going to hurt the trees at this point. You do it in the spring before all the leaves are coming onto the trees.
Okay, so what I would do in soybeans then is use a really high rate of Roundup, the highest labeled rate. That's generally speaking going to take care of your dandelions. You can also throw in metribuzin, gramoxone. There are a number of other products that will burn the top growth down if you want to go that way. But I personally like just a straight shot of a high rate of Roundup.
Well, that's all time we have for this week's Weed of the Week, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Fertilizer application is one of the late season jobs for many farms across the country. With price levels where they're at this year on fertilizer and also the grain prices, you'd like to get the most bang for your buck. Today's Iron Talk should give you some food for thought. Fall fertilization can be great because you give dry fertilizer products like MAP and DAP more time to break down and become available. Plus, it's one less job to do in the spring. However, it's my contention that many farm operations are going to be wasting money on their fertilizer applications this fall, and that means there's an opportunity for a better return on your fertilizer investment dollar. Here are a few ideas. First, fall urea is generally a bad idea. Urea is not the best form of N to use when you've got months before you're going to plant and there's a possibility of heavy snow or rain between now and then. Anhydrous or ammonium sulfate may be better options for you. Otherwise, wait until spring to save yourself 10, 20, maybe even 60% of the product you'll lose by putting it out now. Second, banding is much more efficient. Especially if you have a high calcium or high pH soil, nutrient tie-up is a real thing. By banding, you keep the nutrients concentrated so they naturally resist tie-up. Also, you can protect nutrients like phosphorus by using a veil or a protected phosphorus source like ProGerminator. Third, deep placement is much better than shallow incorporation or leaving nutrients on the soil surface. We prefer to use a knife to put our P&K down 10 inches deep where they're safe and available for our crop all throughout the growing season. Fall fertilization is always going to happen, and it's not a bad thing. Just pick the right products and use the proper equipment to be efficient and environmentally conscious. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
We know that the future is liquid. That's why Agriculture Liquid Fertilizer's corporate sales force is the best trained, best equipped in the industry. Because our communications, our relationships, our ethics are as strong and as innovative as the products we design. That's why our customers trust us. Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers, helping you grow the future.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave pee. Most of your applied pee gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with a Veil Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. A Veil makes more pee available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing pee availability can lead to increased pee uptake in the plant. That's more pee, and more pee. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your pee with a Veil.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
Working in agriculture over the past 3 decades, I saw a need for an accurate way to apply dry product to seed. That's where our Changing Times applicators come in. The CT applicator brush sifts powder into small particles, resulting in proper distribution. Quantities can be adjusted by the speed of the brush rotation. This allows for even and accurate distribution of product. Application at the time of planting can be used with any seed delivery system and saves farmers time, labor, and money. Remember, CT applicators for the Changing Times.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a SoilMax Gold Digger tile plow. SoilMax tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a SoilMax Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with SoilMax. Visit soilmax.com.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but for more agronomic information, we invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show. That's at 2 p.m. Central each weekday on SiriusXM Channel 80.
And don't miss our next Ag PhD television program either. We'll have another Farm Basics Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Plants actually tell farmers what nutrients they need. They don't do it verbally, but farmers get the information through plant tissue analysis. It's another way farmers practice responsible nutrient management. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.